What's up guys, and welcome to my new video. Today I'm going to show you the new updated poison speedfarming build that's going to be the best build for season 1. We have done a lot of testing in the last couple of 2 days after the patch has dropped. We also did a little bit of testing beforehand to anticipate a few of the changes. And what we have cooked up is a full poison variant of the Poison Imbuement Twisting Blades build that we already have used in speed farming and in tier 100. And this time we're dropping crit strike damage entirely, and we're fully focusing on scaling up the poisoning damage from Poison Imbuement. And for that we are using all of the new findings that we discovered doing the testing in the Discord thread as well. Mainly that Poison Imbuement's damage does scale with all damage and core skill damage the best. And that's why we want to incorporate that on our weapons and wherever else we can. So the general idea of the build is still the same. We still run Poison Trap. We use Caltrops instead of Shadow Step though, because the chill is really good against ranged CC mobs. Then we use Concealment with Infiltrator to place the traps. And Poison Imbuement with Blended Poison Imbuement obviously, Puncture and Twisting Blades. But this time we do not increase the damage of Twisting Blades. We solely focus our damage increase on Poison Imbuement, so we're not using the Twisting Blades aspect on the crossbow. Instead, we are using Accelerating, but I'll get to that in a second. What I'm running right here is the tier 100 variant of this build, but I'll also include the changes you have to make if you want to use this for speed farming. The rotation for this build stays basically the same as we know it. You want to alternate between Puncture and Twisting Blades to gain maximum damage. And once Bursting Venoms procs, we want to fully empty our energy bar until we're at 0, and then we want to keep alternating between Puncture and Twisting Blades again. For the gear, we had to change a little bit of the aspects around, because the patch nerfed a lot of our defense, so we had to swap around a bit. Most notably, now we have Enshrouding on the helmet. For speed farming, you can use Shared Misery instead here. But we still want to take ranks of Poison Imbuement, cooldown reduction, maximum life, and total armor. On the chest, we're still playing Might. This is the same chest that we have been using before. Flat damage reduction, distant damage reduction, damage from close enemies, and total armor. On the gloves, we're playing Bursting Venoms. This is just our standard offensive glove that we have always been using. 4 ranks of Twisting Blades, critical strike chance, lucky hit chance, and attack speed. Even though critical strike damage is not as great anymore, we still need critical strike chance to proc most of our passives. For the pants, we are using Umbras on the pants now. We have moved Disobedience to the neck. With these pants, we have damage reduction from enemies that are poisoned, damage reduction from close enemies, total armor, and flat damage reduction. You can also use damage reduction from distant enemies here. Either one is fine. The higher you go, and especially for tier 100, I would still recommend distant damage reduction over damage reduction from enemies that are poisoned, because it's usually the fireball from across the room that kills you. For the boots, in tier 100, we're using Shared Misery. We want all stats, damage reduction while injured, resource energy cost reduction, and movement speed. Ideally, we would want to have multiple evades on this one, but I don't have these, so I'm using what I have. For speed farming, you would use Penitent Greaves instead, and move Shared Misery to the helm. For the neck, we have Disobedience. We want damage reduction from distant enemies, we want damage reduction from close enemies, we want total armor, and ideally we would want the Exploit passive +3. I didn't get that to roll, so I used Deadly Venom instead. For speed farming, you would use a different necklace. We could drop a little bit of our defense to add Frigid Finesse for more damage, because we also use Penitent Greaves. We want cooldown reduction. We still want one form of damage reduction, either distant damage reduction, armor, or close damage reduction. And that's up to you. You can either use energy cost reduction if you feel like your defense is fine, but if you still want more defense, then use one of the 3 from distant damage reduction, close damage reduction, or total armor. The stat priorities on the rings have changed quite significantly. We now want resource generation, maximum life, vulnerable damage, and critical strike chance, and we drop the critical strike damage entirely. On the other ring, we want the same. We also want Aspect of Corruption to increase our Poison Imbuement damage against vulnerable enemies. On the other ring, we want to play Infiltrator to make placing poison traps a lot easier and have all of the enemies in range CC'd at the same time, when we can lay down all of the traps while we're using Concealment. When you're fighting a boss, you would have to change the ring to a ring with Energizing. For weapons, we're using Ashiara's Kanja. This is the absolute best weapon to use in this build because it gives us everything we need, it gives us lucky hit chance, and it gives us insane attack speed, which allows us to proc Bursting Venoms more often, to proc all of our other things more often, more Siphoning Strikes, more Innovate procs, and all of the other good stuff that we have. For the gems here, we always want to use damage over time, because we are not using critical strike damage anymore, so this is the logical choice to scale up our poisoning damage. For the other dagger, we want a dagger that has dexterity, core skill damage, all stats, and vulnerable damage. I did not have one of these daggers here, so I've used what I had with a high item level. And for the imprint, you want to have Twisting Blades here. The damage roll is absolutely irrelevant on the Twisting Blades aspect, just because we are not scaling up our damage with Twisting Blades anyway, because the main portion of our damage comes from Poison Imbuement itself, and not from the physical damage that Twisting Blades deal. Therefore, we also want to use a crossbow with Accelerating to increase our attack speed, to have more Poison Imbuement uses and more Twisting Blades rotate around us while Bursting Venoms is active. And more attack speed also means more heals and more procs of the other good stuff. For the crossbow, we want to use Dexterity, vulnerable damage, and all stats, and ideally you would want to have core skill damage on this instead of damage to close enemies, because core skills scales better with Poison Imbuement. So for our skills, there's nothing really new. We're still using Puncture, Twisting Blades, we put 3 ranks into Sturdy and Siphoning Strikes. Siphoning Strikes are still really good, so we want to use it, especially because we have a lot of lucky hit chance. I've made the switch to Caltrops, because I think Caltrops do benefit us a lot more, now that I have been a little bit buffed. I initially tested it with Shadow Step, but we have Concealment for the tier 100 build, which gives us Unstoppable, so we do not need another Unstoppable in most cases. We want to use 1 rank of Concussive and Trick Attacks, and if you don't have boots with multiple evades, take a point in Rapid Gambits, otherwise just put it into Concussive. Concealment to make laying down traps with Infiltrator good. We use Dark Shot because we use Umbrus with the movement speed increase. We want to use Poison Trap with the Subverting Poison Trap upgrade to increase our poisoning damage. To increase our critical strike chance, we want to use Precision Imbuement. Then we want to max out Poison Imbuement and take Blended Poison Imbuement as usual, 1 point in Deadly Venom and 3 points in Debilitating Toxins to make the enemies deal less damage to us. Also 1 point in Alchemical Advantage. Then we want to take 3 points in Innovation to gain more energy, and 3 points in Alchemist's Fortune to further increase our lucky hit chance for more procs. Then also 3 points in Trap Mastery for even more critical strike chance, 1 point in Adrenaline Rush, and 3 points in Haste. Our key passive for the tier 100 build and also for the speed farming build will be Momentum. When you're doing the speed farming build, you can drop a little bit of Alchemist's Fortune and put 3 points into Frigid Finesse instead. Also for the speed farming build, you want to drop Infiltrator for dash, and also drop Caltrops for Shadow Step, because we have Chill from Penitent Greaves now. So there have been a lot of changes to our Paragon now, because the nerfs to defense really hurt our overall effective HP, so we have to compensate that by picking up a lot of armor and a lot of life. And therefore we're using Versatility on the starting board to gain more armor and more all damage. All damage scales really well with Poison Imbuement, that's why we have to incorporate the points from it here. We want to pick up both of the rare nodes, especially for the max life, and max out Versatility with 40 points in Dexterity. The non-basic and non-core skill damage increase is not really relevant for us here. Then we move up into the Cunning Stratagem board, where we slot it in Diminish, which also gives us physical damage reduction. That is really important for us. Boosts our core skill damage, because Diminish boosts all the rare nodes, and also gives us armor. While leveling, this is also a perfect way to incorporate this into your build. Let's say you're leveling with Shadow Imbuement, for example, you can still pick all of this up and it will still benefit you in the long run. Then we're moving into Cheap Shot. We socket in Closer, which gives us further damage reduction. The Cutthroat skill damage is not important, but we still pick it up because it's bound onto Closer. Then we have Spearhead here for more damage to healthy enemies, which is really good for Poison Imbuement because that's snapshots. Then we have Armor. And we take Wilds for the damage reduction against slowed enemies, and also Devious for more damage to crowd-controlled enemies. We move up here and take Safeguard for damage reduction from elites, which also gives us a lot of armor that we all pick up, and we pick up the legendary node Cheap Shot. Then we move into Exploit Weakness and pick up Tracker. We also get the vulnerable damage increase on the near the cliff socket, and then we exit the board to the left first, and then we move into No Witnesses to pick up Efficacy, which gives us more all damage and maximum life. Then, back to Exploit New Weaknesses, we move to the other side and pick up Exploit for more vulnerable damage and damage to injured enemies. Go to Unassailable for damage reduction from vulnerable enemies and all of the armor that it gives us. And then move to our 6th board with just Tricks of the Trade. We pick up Brawler for the damage reduction against close enemies and the damage reduction from close enemy magic nodes. Go into our socket where we pick up Devious, which increases damage we deal against crowd-controlled enemies, and also increases our magical nodes on range, which is a lot of armor and damage to elites that we want to pick up as well. Important to note here, you have to have enough stats from all stats that you have on your dagger and on your crossbow and on your boots in order to reach at least 620 strength to gain the increased damage to close enemies and the additional armor, which is most important. Getting enough intelligence for this is not necessary because we do not need another 60% additive damage to elites. It's more important to have enough intelligence to reach this breakpoint for the all damage, and you will definitely have enough strength with the Paragon layout to reach this strength node. And then we move into our last board with this Deadly Ambush, where we socket an Exploit for the vulnerable damage and the application of vulnerable. We pick up poison resistance, not for the poison resistance itself, but for the maximum life at the start of the board, and also the 2 magic nodes. And then we also pick up damage reduction from enemies affected by trap skills. For speed farming, we want to come in from the other side, pick up Spring Loader to make our traps pop faster, and then just move into the Glyph socket as usual. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube and follow me on Twitch to not miss out on any new builds that I'm going to post. Right, as for the Malignant Hearts, which we are going to be using in Season 1, we want to be using Creeping Death, which increases our damage for each different crowd-control effect that you apply to the target, and we also gain increased damage over time, damage against unstoppable or stagger bosses. This is obviously really strong for our poison imbuement, and we want to pick that up every time we can. As for our defensive gem, we either pick up Prudent Heart, which makes us become immune for 2 to 4 seconds if we lose more than 20% life in a single hit, which will definitely happen really often in tier 100. It says here that this effect can only occur every 110 seconds, but the data mining so far has shown that this is severely reduced up to, I think, 10 or 20 seconds only, the higher the item level of the heart that you drop actually is. So this could be potentially really good for tier 100. Alternatively, we can also just use Revenge, which basically gives us a 10 to 20% incoming damage reduction and also deals damage to nearby enemies. As for the other offensive gem, we either want to use the Vile Apothecary, which gives us a chance to apply all imbuement effects at increased potency, which could be really strong, especially because we also then could benefit from the chill and from the shadow damage over time that we get from cold or shadow imbuement. Or we want to use the Barber, which gives us all critical strikes and subsequent damage will be stored in the target, and then there's a big explosion that's going to be there, and that could be really good to blow up packs in tier 100. But we'll have to test and see how that actually plays out in-game. But these are my top picks for the Malignant Hearts. Alright, so that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, I will be live on Twitch pretty much throughout the entirety of the start of season. Just drop by and ask away. I'm always happy to answer these questions, and I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be very fun. Rogues are going to be super strong, and this poison build is going to shred through everything. I'm pretty sure about that, so I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll send you off with a little bit of gameplay showcasing what I did in a tier 98 just yesterday. Let's reduce this cost reduction. I definitely noticed my armor not being high enough here. I'll try to heal. No, there's no way healing through this. It's too risky. Move in between these things. Oh my god, dude. Is there a link for a build? Can't one. The Caltrops is just a test, basically. This is a tier 100 build that I'm using right here.